This video will be covering common postural problems that you may see in an everyday population. So before we get into some of the specifics, I wanted to cover a generality. So with a lot of our faulty postures, what you end up developing in the body is you develop a part of the body that's going to be concave, and you develop a part of the body that's going to be convex. So just as a general rule, any part of the body that is concave is going to be short and tight with contracted muscles. So think really quickly about a concave part of the body. If someone has excessive lordosis, for example, in the lumbar spine, so think about how their lumbar spine is going to be curved more anteriorly. It's going to create a concavity. Those muscles in that lumbar lordosis are going to be very short and very tight. Now think on the exact opposite side, through the hips and through the abdominals. What you have there in an example of excessive lordosis is you have created a convexity through the hips and through the abs. So the abs and the hip flexors are going to be long, right? They're going to be weak, they're going to be stretched, they're not going to be contracted constantly. And so with this simple example of an excessive lordosis in the lumbar spine, hopefully you can see that the body has created a concavity and a convexity. We can take nearly any postural deficiency or faulty posture, and we can usually develop or identify a concavity in the body and a convexity. And just remember, on that concave side, we're talking short, we're talking tight, contracted, we're talking excess pressure. On the convex side, it's weak, it's long, and it's usually less pressure. Okay, so keep that in mind as we roll through some of these slides. So the first specific postural thing that you may see in someone, and it's very, very likely that we'll see this on someone in class, is this handedness posture. So the handedness posture, as you look through this, the posterior side or an anterior view is the perfect place to identify this. But what you're going to see here is you're going to see that one shoulder hangs lower than the other shoulder. So from an anterior view, you can kind of look at the level of the clavicles and see if you feel like they're even across. On this posterior view, you can look at the scapulas, or you can look straight across at the trapezius muscle on the top and see if you feel like they're even on the top. So this handedness posture is actually, it's very common, especially in people, like for example, in my populations that I'm used to dealing with. We will see this handedness posture a lot in athletes that use one side of their body. Baseball players that are constantly throwing, quarterbacks that are constantly throwing. Not so much in lacrosse players, softball players for sure, especially softball pitchers, we're going to see this handedness posture where the shoulder hangs lower and the hips tilt to that side. So what you can see here is the body is creating an area that is closer together. Muscles are going to be tight, they're going to be contracted. So this becomes our concavity in the body. Right through there. So this is the result a lot of times of those muscles being contracted very frequently, so they tend to develop that shoulder at a lower angle than others. So this is handedness posture. This is in a right-handed person, this is in a left-handed person here. The next specific postural malalignment that you might see is this kyphosis lordosis posture. I know we talked about this a little bit in the spine. So in regards to our plumb line here, what we're going to see is you're actually going to notice that this person actually has the plumb line. They don't look awful down here at the ankle. Maybe they're a little anterior, but when you get up here in the pelvis, this is where we begin to see some postural things where you're like, oh, I don't know if that's what it should look like. So remember, we should hit that greater trochanter. She's probably just anterior to that greater trochanter just a little bit. You can see here that this pelvis is definitely leaning forward. You can see the convexity here through the abs and the hips. You can see a concavity in this lordosis, but then look here at the back. So we have excessive kyphosis, hence the name kyphosis lordosis posture. We have a nice sharp angle here, and then up in the head you actually see, oh, well, this person, their head looks on line. But she didn't hit that, this plumb line did not bisect the shoulder there. We didn't go right through those vertebral bodies, right? And so you can look at this and see, I think this is a kyphosis lordosis posture. Again, just as a reminder, looking at the convexities and the concavities. Concave, convex, right? This is going to create a concavity here through the thoracic area of the body, right? Concave, convex through here, not as much because our ribs hold that generally in place pretty well, but in theory, it still is there. The next postural malalignment that you might see commonly is this sway back posture. So when you look at this sway back posture, again, look at just looking right away at the plumb line. The thing I want you to notice right away is look how anterior they are in the plumb line, especially through the hips. Okay, so they have pushed themselves forward in their body. They're actually bisecting the shoulder. They look pretty good at the head. But remember, this plumb line should hit that greater trochanter. So what they're doing is they're throwing those hips a little bit forward. You'll see a decreased amount of lordosis through the lumbar spine. And then the plumb line will be behind that greater trochanter. It's going to be posterior to these lumbar vertebrae. And then it's probably going to get back on track through here. They're going to experience some posterior tilt in the pelvis, so that pelvis is going to rotate back, helping eliminate some of that lumbar lordosis, and again, in front of the plumb line through the hips. Ooh, what just happened? Here we go. So this is a slide that kind of is going to identify a lot of these postures. So remember, this is that sway back that we just saw. The hips are going to be in front of the plumb line. They're going to posteriorly rotate that pelvis, decrease the lordosis. They'll be a little bit behind there. The person that we saw in the last video, or in the last slide, they actually didn't have a forward head, but this slide said that can happen commonly. The flat back, if you remember from the spine unit, so again, they're going to posteriorly rotate their pelvis. They're eliminating their lumbar lordosis, creating the illusion of a straight vertebral column. This is that kyphosis lordosis posture. You can see excessive lordosis, excessive kyphosis in the spine. This is a excessive lordosis, it looks like. Lordosis, increased anterior lumbar. So it looks like this person simply has excessive lumbar lordosis without any excessive kyphosis. This last one over here, hopefully you can look at this and see the scoliosis there. Maybe if we zoom in a little bit, you can see it a little better. So we just have some lateral deviations of the vertebrae as we go through that plumb line. Let's keep going here. We'll zoom back up, back out a little bit. This is that flat back posture. So what this person has done is they have simply rotated their pelvis posteriorly to eliminate lumbar lordosis, creating the illusion of a flat back. So when you look at this person on the plumb line, again, they're going to be a little bit forward, not as far as in the sway back, but they're going to be a little bit forward on the plumb line. This postural alignment, in my opinion, they generally have that forward head tilt. They get rid of that lumbar lordosis. The kyphosis then pushes that forward, and you're going to see some concavities here in the neck, in that posterior neck where they hold their head upright and back. Okay, so now as we roll through these last couple little slides. So we talked a little bit, we've talked some about the convexities and the concavities. This is getting at the idea of muscle imbalances, right? If we have muscle imbalances, if we're constantly sitting in a chair and our hip flexors are constantly shortened, where our hip extensors are constantly lengthened, what types of effects might that have on postural alignment? So in a short, tight muscle, we're going to have lack of mobility, right? In those short, tight muscles. On the opposite, on the contrary, in our weak muscles, in the muscles that are constantly lengthened, we're going to get some convexities. They're not going to be able to contract that. They might develop some muscular imbalances, right, from one side to the other, which results in postural malalignment. So there's a lot to consider in the muscles, considering all of the muscles throughout the body. So remember, on the concave side, even if it's due to a muscular imbalance, on the concave side is generally going to contribute to increased compression. Okay, let me say that one more time. On the concave side, that is going to generally contribute to increased compression. For example, at the knee, right? If we have a genuvarum, right? If we have a genuvarum, and so the medial knee is the concavity, the medial knee is going to experience increased compression compared to the lateral side of the knee. So on the convex side, on that lateral knee, we're going to have stretching, right? That lateral collateral ligament will be stretched. There's not going to be a lot of pressure on that lateral meniscus. The IT band is going to be stretched. Any muscle that crosses the joint on that side is likely to be stretched. On the concave side, we're going to have compression and tightness, right? So that's getting at some of this potential effects of that muscular imbalances. We already know this can happen because of heredity, right? Genetics. It may happen because someone is constantly in a faulty alignment, right? Maybe they're sitting at their desk. Maybe they work a job where they constantly have to be in some type of certain position. There's so many possibilities. But just know, with all of these postural deficiencies, it could come because of genetics. It could come because of things that happen in a person's day-to-day life. So a few more videos here. This is, I know we haven't covered the knee, so I threw a few of these in. This is a genu recurvatum. You're going to look at this from that lateral view. So genu recurvatum is when a person is able to hyperextend their knee. And you'll see that. Remember, through the knee from that lateral view, that plumb line should bisect the knee pretty good. So if someone has hyperextension of the knee, which is likely, we will find someone in class with a hyperextended knee, we won't see that plumb line bisect the knee there very well. This is our genuvarum and our genuvalgum. So genuvarum is that bow-legged. The genuvalgum is the knock-kneed. And then this is our regular alignment. So you may see this from that anterior or posterior view where it feels like the knees aren't over the ankles, right? And you just have to look and see which one it is. This is, again, just another picture of that genuvalgum. The genuvarum, you can see the nice wide bowed leg there. Scoliosis, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I just want to, as a reminder, as a refresher, the rib hump that you might see because of the rotated vertebrae there with the Adams forward bend test, you can do that in a postural assessment and see that hopefully fairly easily. Just again as a reminder of a kyphotic curve in the spine, that you may not necessarily see it as much in an upright posture assessment, but when you have the person bend over doing that Adams forward bend test, you can easily identify that kyphotic curve. This is another picture of that kyphotic curve. The scoliosis, looking at this from the posterior view, is easily the best way to distinguish this. You can also use the Adams forward bend test. Another picture of scoliosis. And then finally, as we get to these last couple, we are going to just use the plumb line, but you can also use a postural analysis grid chart, which is going to help. That especially helps with the handedness charts. It can help you with the carrying angles. So it's just essentially something where you can use it to compare side to side what someone looks like. And then lastly, take a second. You just went through all of these videos on posture. See if you can look at these postures and start to break some of these down here before class, right? Look at where this plumb line falls. See what you think. I mean, look at how anterior these hips are. Doesn't quite get the shoulder, but it looks pretty good at the head. So take a second and just look at some of these postures and see if you feel like you can identify what's going on there before you even come to class. It would help you immensely. So that finishes this video on the faulty postures that you might see in everyday life.